reading book on pausing and institutions, written by me, Eric Wadell. First draft, February 2026. Modern-day dynamics institutions. Fourth order, cooperation and competition, dynamics institutions. Our fourth and final order of institutions is the dynamics institution. The defining characteristic of this institution is the cooperation and competition between and within each of the three higher orders. The dynamics of today thus consists of the different forms of cooperation and competition that there are between and within the quasi-total institutions, the quasi-partial institutions, and the quasi-personal institutions. At this point of our reasoning, one aspect stands out a little extra, namely that each of the three orders of institutions all have the prefix quasi in front of it. This means that every institution of today will have a loose and arbitrary quality to it, which we know to be true in our bodies, but that our thoughts might try to disprove with seemingly rational arguments. Expressed differently, our bodies cannot forget the true institutions of old, even though our developed intellects have created more complicated modern institutions. What then do we really end up with? We end up with a twofold reality, one intuitive and one arbitrary, one physiological and one intellectual, one appealing to our emotions and one appealing to our rationality. The dynamics institutions of today will inevitably reflect this twofold reality. There will be cooperation and competition in the realm of old truths, but there will also be cooperation and competition in the realm of new ideas. Our first reality will feel honest, but also brutal. And our second reality will feel dishonest, but also refined. The quasi-personal institutions of today try their best to innovate, be rejected, and then innovate again for the sake of modernity. But they also try their best to innovate for the sake of old truth. Individuals long for the grounded tribes of old, all the while they live their day-to-day lives in the institutions of today. Individuals will look for the characteristics of caveman times, even in modern organization and technology. And the dynamics of personal institutions will reflect this dual-natured ambition. Expressed somewhat poetically, individuals will see the new faces of today, but never stop looking for the faces they remember as deeply personal from before. At some times in life, we will find ourselves justifying our dynamics with the cold logic of our mind, and at other times with the warm logic of our dreams. The quasi-partial institutions of today also reflect the dual nature of its members. In the subgroups of today, there are expressed goals of tradition as well as of novelty. Each subgroup tries their best to appeal to emotion, but also to rationality. Like this, the quasi-partial institutions of today will at some times engage in emotional dynamics, and at other times engage in rational dynamics, depending on which one is the most popular at the given time. Take sports clubs as an example. Common credos of sports clubs often contain something like tradition, but also something like excellence. The same is true for political parties. Common appeals are something like vote with your heart, but also vote smart. Advertisement for the products of corporations likewise reflects this dual nature, often displaying some emotionally stirring image, coupled together with some rational message. The quasi-total institutions of today are also engaged in dual-natured dynamics with all orders of institutions. Earlier in our text, we made use of 5 different examples of quasi-total institutions. The Internet, international corporate law, peace-centered diplomatic world order, democratic governments, and a loose set of taboos. It would be too extensive for this text to look at the dual nature dynamics of all of these examples respectively, but we may look at 1 or 2 such cases. For example, within the peace-centered diplomatic world order, we sometimes make loose appeals to our shared humanity. But we also formulate laws and quotas which must be qualitatively and quantitatively adhered to. A second example. Within the Internet, we see an astronomical amount of content appealing to our emotions. But the Internet also rests upon vast mathematical calculation and programming. In our modern times, taken as a whole, we find ourselves constantly shifting our weight between these 2 legs of emotion and rationality. the dynamics institutions of today seem to be both true and false at the same time. Or maybe they are true in a dual sense, but never really true in any one coherent sense. 40,000 years ago, we had no choice but to be loyal to our tribe. Today, we have not replaced the tribes of old, but only added a second layer of loyalty upon it. Today, each and every one of us must withstand the inner tension between these two loyalties. And in such a perpetual state of inner tension, we are constantly looking for ways to alleviate some of that tension. One way in which we do that is by perpetually trying to create a disadvantaged them. In our modern twofold reality, our modern twofold loyalty between the emotional institutions of old and the rational institutions of today, we have a hard time finding any coherent us. Seen in a short-term perspective, we may alleviate some of our inner tension by counteracting an unwanted them. It could be argued that short-term we may alleviate more inner tension by being anti-someone than by being pro ourselves. We may say something like, look, that subgroup is evil and they're also dumb. Like this, we often find modern dynamics to have this dual-natured anti-orientation to it. We may say that they are tribal in the wrong way, but also that they are non-rational. These anti-dynamics become like a sectarian dynamics institution, which diverts our effort away from being pro anything of our own. The more tension we carry within us, the more we will get stuck in this short-term sectarianism. It is tiresome. We pause for a second or two and see that the dynamics of today, the cooperation and competition, has a dual loyalty to it. One to our emotions of old, and the other to our ideas of new. We also pause and see that this dual loyalty creates tension within us, and that we may become more anti-someone than pro ourselves as a consequence when we try to alleviate some of that tension. Simpler times and modern times, a dual typology of institutions. Now we have looked at each of the four orders of institutions, both in how they might have been 40,000 years ago and also in how they arguably are today. When we combine our findings, we end up with the following dual typology of institutions. So we have the order, how it was 40,000 years ago, and how it is in modern time. First order, tribe, total institution, in singular, and in modern time, Quasi-total institutions in plural. Second order, the subgroups, the partial institutions, and in modern time, the quasi-partial institutions. Our third order, which 40,000 years ago was individuals, the personal institutions, and in modern time, quasi-personal institutions. And finally, our fourth order, which 40,000 years ago was cooperation and competition as dynamics institutions, in modern time, expresses itself as a dual loyalty. As we try our best in navigating the institutions of today, we always have this dual loyalty with us. And throughout the remainder of this book, we will pause and look at the dynamics of this dual loyalty. What is our lived experience like, resting upon this dual loyalty? Next, we will again place our main focus on pausing and make use of a few universal skills that we may develop out of it. The universal skills are like the natural laws supporting pausing, and we may make use of them in every and any situation.